Righto, we've got a CM control arm here. You can tell it's a CM control arm from this reinforcement tag at the back there. It stops the two halves from spreading apart. Some people like to weld a plate on the back of these. That stops them from spreading apart and strengthens the whole arm up as well. Has a couple of holes in the plate for your torsion bar bolt, which goes in that way, so you can get to it obviously, and also a hole for your bump stop rubber nut up the guts there, so you can get that out. So anyway, we'll be replacing this bush today. That's a replacement bush there, and what we'll have to do is push this pin out. We get to the back of the pin where the torsion bar goes in, and we push on that part of the pin in there, which is the back of the pin. Pushes the pin out of the bush, and what you're left with is this inner shell left on the pin, and we'll show you how to take that off the pin. And in the arm itself you're left with the outer shell and the rubber. The rubber, you can just poke that out. It don't have to be burnt out like some people say. It basically falls out. You put a bit of pressure on it, and then you're left with the shell, which is a little bit of a hassle to pull it out, but if you've got the right tools, it's no trouble at all. So what we'll do is take this arm over to the press, push that pin out, and replace the bush. Righto, we've now got the lower control arm set up in the press. This is just a little press. It comes from super cheap for 140 bucks or whatever it was, primarily to do this job, and it does it quite well. So here we go. This is how we push that pin out. We've just got a bit of bar in there, and we're just going to crank down on the press and push that pin out. Righto, could do with a bigger press. There's the lower control arm. There's the pin. As you can see, it's got this inner shell left on the pin, which we'll remove. Okay, on to the next step. Now it's time to pick this rubber out. It's just in here. You need to scrub the screwdriver down there and just pluck it out. Out she comes. Simple as that. Just flew across the room. So that's what you're left with there. That's the outer shell, which will be taken out next. Here's the rubber that come out of it. Yep. Righto, now the removal of the outer shell, and that's this part here, which is, where's the bush? Which is that part of the bush, the outer shell of the bush. Now, in order to get this out, there's a few different ways that people use. The last time I did this job, I used a little cold chisel, and I cut along the top here and down the sides. Cut along the top and down the sides. Put about 4 grooves in it. Then I crushed it in on itself. Brought it in smaller, reduced the size of it, and pushed it out. Some people get a washer and they put it on the top here, put a couple of welds around, then they turn it up the other way and push it out with a press from the other side. Some people say they use an oxy and they cut it out there. Bearing in mind this outer shell is very thin, and you don't want to be damaging the sleeve that's behind that. What I have today is this big tap 1 3/8 UNF. This is what the factory recommend. I'm going to stick that in there, wind it in and push it out from the other side and drag the shell out. This is probably the best way because it won't damage what's behind that shell. Righto, we'll see how it goes. I already started this one off. It was a bit difficult to start, but I got it there in the end. I will just wind that around in there. Then we'll put it in the press and drag the shell out. And it's a matter of getting the shell off the tap, which probably be a bit of mucking around. Okay, let's give that a go. We'll put that in the press, big tap, and that should, we'll put the press in from the other side. Push that tap out, drag the shell out to see how we go. Okay, we've got the control arm set up in the press with the tap screwed into the outer shell of the lower control arm. We're just going to give it a crank on the handle of the press and it should pull the outer shell out. Here we go. Moving, coming out, nice and clean, no swearing. There we go, drop it out. Okay, this is the outer shell on the tap. That's what we've dragged out of the lower control arm. Okay, what's left of the control arm? No shell left in there, it's been pulled out. Now it's time to put another bush in there. Okay. Righto, we've just dragged that shell out and as you can see this lower control arm's been rebushed before. About 15 years ago or 16 years ago when I first bought the car, I got a professional front end guy to rebush the front end for me. Obviously he's used the wrong tools, he's used a coal chisel or an air chisel to get that outer shell out of the arm. He's damaged the arm in doing so, and as you can see there's big grooves in it. There's a few down that side. So overall the job don't look real pretty and potentially you're destroying the arm as well using that method. So I reckon the best method, you go with the factory way, which is use a big 1 3/8 inch tap. All it does is damage that outer shell and you disregard that anyway. So it's up to you. Righto, now it's time to remove the inner shell from the bush off the pin. All we do is we get a coal chisel and we hammer that down on that, which spreads the shell out, and you do that every quarter and it will loosen that shell up and it should just slip right off that pin. a couple of whacks, spread it each side, and your pin's nice and safe. There's no cut marks down the pin, down the face of the pin. It is possible to cut them off with an angle grinder. You get your angle grinder, you cut down here, you cut down there. You've got to be very careful not to cut right through it, otherwise you damage your pin. Righto, the next step is to press the pin that you've just taken the inner sleeve off into the new bush, into its inner sleeve. You can just seat that in there a little bit like that to start with, get it nice and square. That's probably not square, but we'll fix it up when we get it in the press. I've just gone and got a bit of scrap metal pipe that I slip over the pin and put it in the press down on there, and it's just as simple as that, just pushing it down to that step in the pin into the bush. Righto, so over to the press. Okay, so we've got the bush in the press with the pin in it. We've got the little bit of pipe that goes over there that pushes on that flange on the pin. We put a little piece of plate on the top there, push on the pin, and we'll just crank it down and push that pin into the bush. No need to use grease. I recommend not using grease. And done. One pin. Pressed into the bush. Okay, so now we've got to press that whole lot into the lower control arm, and we don't use grease, we put it in dry. Now comes the part where we push the pin that's already had the bush pressed on it. We're going to press that into the lower control arm. So we get that as square as we can. I've got another scrap piece of pipe here, sort of radius off the edge so it follows the contour of the bush, so it's not just pressing on the outer lip and bending it over, it actually pushes on the whole radius of the bush. So we put that on there, take up some difference. Get the press coming down, shift it over a touch, takes a bit of wobbling and moving, you get them set up in the press right, and that's not right. Righto, we get it all as square as we can in the press. We've got the bush there, lower control arm, the pipe that pushes it in, spacer, and here we go. No grease, push it in dry, here we go. Bush going in. Whoops, we need a handle on this. Bush going in. All the way. Down to the finer points, we just lay it down and watch the two rims come together. Okay, we're seated, we're home, all the way.